Good evening, Chair. Calls to order public hearing for Resolution 022-22, Aberdeen Annexation Zoning Waiver. Councilman Wagner.
Resolution number 022-22 is introduced by myself, and it relates to the 9.062 acres annexed by City of Aberdeen. It's currently zoned ag, but as you know, when the City of Aberdeen annexes, they need a waiver if they're going to move ahead within 5 years. Outside of 5 years, they don't have to wait for it, but there's a desire to move ahead, and this piece is only 9 acres. It makes perfect sense with what's around it because it's all land that has been annexed in, and this is an access for Long Drive. You've got a presentation before you that we were handed late today. If you want to skim through that, and if there's any questions, we will see if we can get you the answers, but it's pretty straightforward. We've done these annexation waivers before. This one makes perfect sense in terms of the other properties around it. And that's the desire of Aberdeen to move forward with mixed office and residential housing down off of Long Drive in Gilbert and back that way. So it's an expansion of the city of Aberdeen, and they requested the waiver on this.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Council, your time for questions, if anyone has any questions or comments. Seeing none. Ms. Dixon, do we have anyone signed up?
There are no speakers, Mr. President.
All right. With no one signed up to speak, this will conclude this public hearing for Resolution 022-22, and we will take it up at a future meeting. And now, Bill 22-022, definitions tax credit for elderly individuals and veterans. Mr. Sandless, Mr. Boniface.
Good evening, Council President. Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to present Bill 22-022 that will amend Harford County's tax credit program for seniors and veterans. In 2016, the Maryland General Assembly passed enabling legislation granting local governments in the state the ability to allow for property tax credits of up to 20% for our seniors who had lived in their homes for 40 years and retired members of our military along with their surviving spouse. In 2017, the County Council and the County Executive approved legislation to implement this tax credit program, and it's been in place since then. During the Maryland General Assembly session this past spring, the state passed legislation to allow local governments to expand upon this very popular program. The County Executive is requesting your support that will lower the residency requirement from 40 years to 35 years, extends the maximum years an individual can be granted this credit from 5 years to 20 years, and increases the maximum allowed assessed value of the home from $400,000 to $600,000. The program would also add individuals who served in the military and have an approved service-connected disability along with their surviving spouse. I'm going to now turn it over to Mr. Sandless, who will provide some background on how successful the program has been for us, how we came up with these proposed changes, the estimated fiscal impacts, and the process how individuals who have not signed up for the program at this point can take advantage of it, and that the county executive hopes this will assist our seniors and our retired veterans age in space.
Thank you. So as Mr. Boniface commented, the current plan, which requires it to be an owner-occupied home, you receive a 20% tax credit. The first tax year that went into effect was the one beginning July 1st, 2018. Did apply for individuals that were 65 and older with 40 years in the same home, or 65 and older with retired military that's retired, which generally meant that they did 20 years and officially retired from military service, or their surviving spouse. Again, it was a $400,000 assessed value. It was more or less kind of a hard cap. If you were above that, you were not eligible. If you were below that, you were eligible for the tax credit. And of course, it was a 5-year eligibility, so that what that meant is that those enrolled in 2018 would not have been eligible for next year's taxes, the ones that go out in July of 2023. So with that program, it's been very successful. Currently, we have about 3,750 total enrolled. About 3,250 of that 3,750 were eligible under the 40-year eligibility guideline, and then about 500 were eligible under the retired military surviving spouse. And the total cost of that tax credit has been about $1.9 million. So under the proposal, still maintain the owner-occupied home, the 20% tax credit, but expand that eligibility and length of credit. So 65 plus and 65 years of age plus and 35 years in the same home. That is the change from 40 years, 65 plus retired military and surviving spouse. There's no change in that regard. Are moving the assessed value cap from $400,000 to $600,000. Disabled veteran or disabled active military and surviving spouse due to service-related disability. So if they received that disability related to service, I mean, if it was something that wasn't related to service, it wouldn't be eligible under this. But then there is no age requirement for that designation. There will now be 20 years of eligibility. Again, previously that was for 5 years. And then all of these changes would be effective for next year's tax bills. These will be the tax bills that go out in July of 2023. So as far as the cost, estimate the ongoing cost of everything, including the existing program maintaining, as well as the expansion of the eligibility, to be about $6 million. So the current plan is about $2 million, and then the expansion will add another $4 million for a total of $6 million. And again, these are all estimates, and it's going to be difficult to see how it'll play out in practice. But estimate now about 10,000 individuals, property owners, would receive the credit, and that's up from 3,750. Now, the cost and the number of the eligible homeowners will likely kind of increase as home values increase over time and more people become eligible for the program. And of course, the long-term cost will go up as well, as the credit will now last for 20 years as well as for 5 years. We can kind of just talk a little bit about those cost assumptions and kind of what I think is driving them. As I said before, the existing eligibility is a little bit under $2 million. The change of 40 years to 35 years, I think there might be about 3,000 homeowner properties that haven't been transferred in the last 35 to 40 years. So we were able to run those numbers from our ICT department. And kind of based on an average assessment of about $300,000, that would translate into about a $600 credit. So about $1.8 million, $1.8 million of tax credit revenues for that group. Then for the change from $400,000 to $600,000, we think there's about 250 homeowner-occupied properties that are in that gap that haven't transferred in the last 35 years, and then also putting some additional in there for how much might fall under for the retired military. In those cases, it'll be a little bit higher, a higher average credit. There, I'm assuming about $1,000 based upon an average assessment of about $500,000. So I think that'll cost about $250,000. So all told there, it's about $4 million in the annual tax credit. Before we get to the disability, I will say that the disability criteria is probably estimating the cost is a little more tricky because unlike the property ownership for 35 years plus, we don't have that easy access data where we can just go into the state property tax returns and say, okay, you know, what's assessed at this level, what hasn't transferred in 35 years. But kind of based upon some of the numbers we do know, I know from our Veterans Commission, I've seen estimates that there are about 20,000 vets in the county. And I've also seen stats from veterans associations and the like, and the VA, that about 25% of all vets have service-related disabilities. So that would translate into about 5,000 vets. Now, of course, not all vets are going to be property owners. However, veterans do have a higher rate of property ownership than does the national average. So for veterans, it's about 80% as opposed to about 60-some% for the national average. So that's about 4,000 vets. Should also note that under state law, if you currently have a 100% service-related disability, you have a 100% tax abatement. And actually, and that kind of works not even like a tax credit that you have to apply for. Once you provide your documentation to the state, your taxable assessment, if you will, is kind of no longer considered taxable, kind of goes to non-taxable in the same way of like a nonprofit or something like that. So here in the county, we have about 1,000 disabled veterans that qualify for that distinction, and there's about another 100 surviving spouses that qualify for that. So for those individuals, they're already receiving 100% tax credit, so they would not be eligible for this program because they have no tax liability. So that's, gets us down to about maybe 3,000 or so. Surviving spouse is a little bit harder to calculate, kind of based upon some numbers. I would expect maybe a few hundred there. But we're also probably going to have some other places where individuals are already eligible under the 35 years, or there's other things like that. So I think some of those distinctions may very well net out. So kind of working with about 3,000 eligible veterans and surviving spouses, I think is a reasonable number. And then again, based upon that same average assessment and average credit, would expect that to be around $1.82 million. I should note that like the disability language in the state law is a little vague. And we will need to work through the rules and regulations process as far as defining some of the documentation that will be required for service-related disabilities, how it's defined, all of those things. So that will be a process that will be forthcoming. So just to kind of wrap up, so these changes again would apply to next year's tax bills, the ones that go out in July. Those rules and regulations where we'll need to detail some of like the documentation requirement and all of that. We'll expect those to come out in the winter. And then the applications would be available in January and then run through April as it is with the current program so that we could get everything to the state, everything into our system so that the tax credit would appear on the bills when they're printed. And I should just note that these credits, this is a very kind of manual process due to verifying information that is required. Requests for driver's license, home titles, military records, et cetera. So would just encourage anyone who is eligible for it to go through the instructions and to make sure that they include all their necessary documentations and to get that in early so that we can process this in a timely manner. Because again, I think we are looking at a pretty substantial increase in the number of applications that will be eligible to receive this.
Mr. Boniface, anything else?
No, just that if approved, we will go to work right away on trying to get the word out on this. And the county executive will be sending a letter out to the senior community and our veterans.
Well, thank you. And Robbie, I want to thank you for being there, answering the questions that I had with a couple phone calls over the last few weeks. Councilman Johnson, when the legislation was first coming out, Councilman Johnson had some questions that the legislation did answer, but I don't know if you have any other questions tonight, sir, or not? No. Okay. Mr. Giangiordano?
So, thank you, Mr. Sandless. Certainly had a couple questions, but you went through and you answered them all, but you certainly did have a lot of information, financial information. Are we going to get a copy of some of that?
I can do that.
Okay, because you really run through that pretty quick, and I did get some of the numbers and written that down. The only question I have is for disabled. Do they also have to be retired, or if they were disabled before they retired, or do they qualify for that?
So actually, the language allows that they can even be active military with a service disability as well as former military, but they don't need to be the 65 and older. So, I mean, theoretically, I mean, you could have, someone who is 18, 19 years old and is eligible, and then likewise, you might have, again, traditional retirees that are eligible.
That was my big question. I wasn't sure about that, so I appreciate you answering that. And I really think everything else you kind of answered. So I thank you very much.
Anyone else? Mr. Schroeds?
Does this exactly mimic the enabling legislation, or are we just pairing it to the cost that we can?
Well, the
bear in
enabling
counties?
legislation gave us up to, so we might have deviated some from it, but we went to where we could, like the assessed value. We chose 600,000 because we felt that we would capture a larger group, and so we didn't have to go to that. But you know.
But it gave you the flexibility to
Yes.
do so. We didn't leave, I guess, too much more on the table. We did it.
Yeah, when they passed the enabling legislation back in 2016, it was very restrictive. And so there was a lot more flexibility.
Right.
with the-
And since that time, you know, we've gotten questions about the 5-year thing, you know, and it's going to expire and, you
Well,
know,
this will fix that,
this will fix that, so.
at least for 20 years.
And it seemed like I was always answering questions, like we took it to the max last time. That's all we could do. That's all we were allowed to do through the enabling legislation, and we did that, so, you know, in this case,
Those lantern bugs,
it sounds like we're,
hard to stomp on it.
right. With his comments on the lantern file, I'll just leave it at that, but you
Thank
answered
you.
most of my questions.
Thank
and threw
you.
me off.
Anyone else? The other question I have for you, Robbie, Mr. Boniface, does this address fallen service members, spouses of fallen service members?
So normally, the spouses of fallen service members are covered under the 100% abatement from the state. And I have learned that there are sometimes exceptions where the state law on that says that, that they needed to purchase the house within so long. And I've actually spoken to some surviving spouses that didn't qualify. And after speaking with our law department, we believe that in those rules and regulations, that the disability provision for this would carry over to a surviving spouse of someone who was killed in action. It seems like that's the ultimate disability, provided in the service of the country. So,
I know that we're going to have someone speak to it this evening, so I just wanted to raise that question before we move forward. Mr. Giangiordano?
Does that also include any fallen police officers or disabled police officers on the line of duty or anything like that?
no, this is just related to veterans. I don't believe there is other enabling legislation that sometimes deals with that, and we have that for fallen police officers in other legislation. And there's other state legislation that deals with different professions and law enforcement alike.
Thank you.
Anyone else, council? Ms. Dixon, we have one signed up.
We do, Mr. President. We have 3 this evening. Delegate Lasanti, followed by Arthur Caff.
Good evening, ma'am. Name and address for the record, please.
Can I have a shorter one? Thank you, President. Mr. President and members of the council, Delegate Mary Ann Lasanti, Lapham Road in Havre de Grace. And I'm here to speak on behalf of this bill, speak in favor with an amendment. Mr. Boniface spoke about the enabling legislation, House Bill 617. I was actually the author of that bill. And I'm here to tell you that the necessity of that bill is because the state law and this does not speak to fallen soldiers and their spouses. And that was the nexus of having to do this bill. Sadly, the state tax code says that being disabled is not the same as being dead. And I can give you my file folder of Harford County citizens who have been denied tax abatement under our current law because, sadly, while we give 100% tax abatement for a deserving 100% disabled veteran, if sadly the veteran died on the battlefield or in the line of duty, they received nothing. And I can give you letter after letter after letter. And in writing this legislation, you can review the tapes of the testimony in the House Ways and Means Committee and in the Senate Tax and Finance Committee to that effect. So while the policy may be interpreted one way or another, I can tell you, frankly, that that was not the case. The law that passed, House Bill 617, passed unanimously in the House, it passed unanimously in the Senate, and was passed into law by Governor Hogan. What it did is it gave each municipality in the state of Maryland and each county the ability to amend your tax code to give fallen service members, their families, the tax credit too. So to amend this bill that you have today, to explicitly call them out, to say that Gold Star families in their tax bill could be eligible for the same tax benefit that a disabled veteran would have. So all I simply ask is that you would explicitly amend your bill to say that. The reference that you have here references the military veteran, the National Military Code of if they are eligible for veterans benefits, not state taxation. So I just bring that to your attention. I'd be happy to work with your legal team and with our AG's office and with the comptroller's office. You would be the first jurisdiction in the state to enact such a bill, and being my home county, I would be honored if we could do that together. So President Vincenti, thank you for putting this into the bill, and I would love to work with all of you to make this law. So thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you, Delegate. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Arthur Caff, 1427 Briar Hill Estates Drive, Bel Air, Maryland, 21015. Good evening again, Council President Vincenti, members of the council. I'm here to speak in favor of Bill number 22-002, which will expand the eligibility of the 20% real property tax credit for elderly individuals and veterans, especially those who have service-connected disabilities. Currently, as has been described, the tax credit applies to those who are 65 and over who have lived in the same house for at least 40 years, or who are 65 and over and are retired active duty, reserve, or guard, or who are a surviving spouse. If this bill is enacted, it will apply the tax credit to those who are 65 and over and have lived in the same house for 35 years, and also veterans, active duty, reserve, or guard who have a service-connected disability regardless of age. And it will also continue to apply to retired members who are 65 or over. And as has been indicated, it will also expand the real property tax credit for homes with an assessed value of up to $600,000 instead of the current $400,000, and will lengthen the period of eligibility from 5 to 20 years. So enacting the bill simply will be the right thing to do. It honors those who have served in the nation's armed forces and recognizes their service and sacrifice. This is a chance for the council to say thank you and pay respect to our veterans, especially those veterans who have service-connected disabilities. I should mention that my dad was a veteran of World War II and the Korean War, and he was eligible for a real property tax credit in a different state, in Connecticut, and it was very helpful to him and my late mother. And this will be a tremendous piece of legislation, if passed, that will be a real help to elderly and veterans, especially those on fixed incomes. And due to the rising cost of real estate, there is a chance that many veterans and elderly will get priced out of the credit and be ineligible. Thus, increasing the eligibility up to $600,000 for real property value is timely and appropriate. And the legislation, if enacted, will continue to assist in making Harford County a friendly and attractive place for retirees and veterans. And as has been indicated, it should not have a significant impact on revenue. So I ask for the members of the council to enact this legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
The last speaker this evening is Robert Brown.
Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Bob Brown, 1504 Green Valley Court, Bel Air, Maryland. Mr. Boniface, Council President Vincenti, and council members, thank you very much for sponsoring and co-sponsoring this bill, 22-022, the tax credit for elderly individuals and veterans. So often we hear the term, and veterans hear, thank you for your service. What this bill does is it thanks those who have had those injuries, whether on the battlefield or not, while in active duty, and have now come off and retired or are veterans. It's really a thank you from Harford County. What a lot of people may not realize is over 200,000 active duty military members separate every year. What this also does is says for Harford County, this is a county that now recognizes that and gives those tax breaks for those active duty members that are separating. I'd like to quote Captain Jim McMahon. He would often say, the definition of a veteran is someone who at some time in their life raised their hand while at the same time writing a blank check payable to the United States of America up to and including their life. This bill is a way of saying thank you to those veterans that wrote that blank check. Thank you very much. I hope that you pass this bill.
Thank you, sir.
There are no more speakers, Mr. President.
With no one else signed up to speak, this will conclude the hearing for Bill 22-022, and it will be taken up at another time.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, gentlemen. Bill 22-023, Harford County Sheriff's Office Pension Deferred Retirement Option Program. Mr. Sandless, again, sir? Right behind you. Yep. Good evening, sir. Good to see you.
Sure, I'll let you begin, or would you rather be at the end? However you're comfortable. You outrank me.
I'll let you go.
Okay. Right. Bringing forth a proposal from the county executive to amend the sheriff's office pension, which is a county-administered pension, which covers our correctional officers, to include a drop provision. So this addition was a priority for the Correctional Officers Union, who took this matter to the county executive. And the county executive's position is that the pension fund is in a strong position. This change should help with retention efforts at the detention center, and that the benefit far exceeds the limited cost. So I've also briefed the trustees of the Sheriff's Office pension plan on this change, and they are supportive as well. And I should note that our deputies in the Sheriff's Office, who are under the state's LEOPS plan, have access to a drop provision already, so this would be equitable then for the correctional officers. So what is a drop, and how much will it cost the pension? So I'll address the cost part first, and the answer is a fairly limited cost. So the actuaries estimate the annual required contribution to increase by $160,000 if we add this drop provision. So the current ARC is $3 million, and we would increase to a little bit under $3.2 million. And the overall liability would increase slightly as the funding percentage would drop from 84.6% to 83.3%. But as we discussed last week with LoSAP, still on the good side of that 80% number. So it certainly feels that the pension fund is able to accommodate this change. So what is a drop? It's a mechanism that allows someone who is retirement eligible to freeze his pension benefits, have those pension payments and his employee contribution deposited into an account where they will earn interest while he keeps working. So after a set amount of time, he would actually retire and collect his pension on a monthly basis, but then we'll also have access then to this drop account. And it might be a little easier to kind of show this by an example. So this is all just hypothetical, but let's say you have a correctional officer who has 30 years on the job and he's currently making $78,000, and if he retired, he would earn a pension of $50,000 a year. But if he entered the drop, that $50,000 a year would go into an account. He would continue to work, earning his $78,000, but his 9% employee contribution, which case would be around $7,000, instead of just going into the pension trust, would kind of go into his account. So at the end of those 5 years, there would be approximately $350,000 in that drop account from his pension payments, his contributions, and the earned interest. And his pension payment would still be frozen at that $50,000, so he wouldn't earn any additional service time, or his average final salary wouldn't change his pension calculation, but he would have the lump amount, in this example, $350,000, that may or may not be indicative of all, that he could use to then supplement his pension in retirement. And most individuals typically roll this drop into some type of other retirement account, like an IRA, or they purchase an annuity, or something like that. So theoretically, the drop really doesn't cost the pension system, as it would already be paying out those pension benefits and not collecting any additional employee contributions from that individual if he just retired without a drop. So the limited or estimated cost comes from sometimes the interest earned on the drop might be a little bit greater than what the actual investment returns are in the pension trust fund. And that, along with some other kind of actuarial assumptions, is why there's a slight increase to the ARC. Of course, the ARC's always an estimate, and the actual results could vary in either direction. And in either way, though, it shouldn't be too significant. So the benefit to the county of all of this is that we're able to keep some of our most experienced correctional officers on the job for a few more years than they otherwise would be. Of course, it's all voluntary, and not all correctional officers would opt for it, but we expect a few to do so each year. So currently, there's about 100 retired correctional officers collecting pension benefits, and there's 125 active correctional officers. And the actuary estimates there'll be about 12 to 14 who would be immediately eligible for the drop. And we will probably see maybe about 7 to 10 of them sign up next year. And then after that kind of initial rush, if you will, maybe 2 or 3 in subsequent years. Again, it could be all of them, it could be none of them. So just a few parameters, though, on this drop. So the eligibility is between 25 and 30 years of service. So you're not eligible if you want to retire at age 20 years, and likewise, you do have to then make that decision in your 30th year of service that you want to enter the drop, which would in essence be taking you up to 35 years. So the interest rate on that account is 3.5%. And then a participant can sign up for the drop in increments of 1 year, at least 1 year, and not more than 5. So you can't be in the drop for like 10 years or anything like that. The pension payments are frozen, but the participant would receive any COLAs as if he retired. So if there's any adjustments based on a COLA, that amount would still continue to accumulate. So this option would be available beginning on July 1st of 2023. So individuals will be able to kind of determine if this is right for them and then act on it after July 1st. And then, of course, the drop accounts will be tracked by the actuary, and participants will receive an annual statement to say, okay, this is how much is in your account, and so that they have that information. With that, I will ask our counsel at Miles and Stockbridge if he has any comments.
Very few comments, other than the fact that this is a pretty common provision. As Mr. Sandlis mentioned, there's another pension plan in the county that already has this provision. There are other counties in the state of Maryland and in the rest of the country that have a drop provision attached to their pension plan.
Sir, if I may, I did not get your name.
Paolo Pasicolin from Miles and Stockbridge.
Thank you. Sheriff?
I don't know if there's much to say, but Sheriff Jeff Gaylor, and I think Mr. Sandlis did a wonderful job explaining the concept, the need, and how the drop actually works, deferred retirement option plan. Mr. Council President, council members, I appreciate your time tonight, being able to come in here. I appreciate the county executive for taking the time, once again, to look out for our great men and women at the Harford County Sheriff's Office. As you heard from Mr. Sandlis, the drop program has existed on the law enforcement side for some time. I was a participant in my last agency before I retired from the state police, participated in the deferred retirement option program there. It is a way, and I did write each of you a letter, I hope it's in the packet that you have, earlier this week. But there is a benefit to the Harford County Sheriff's Office, and that's the reason I am a strong supporter in asking you to support this and pass this bill, as well as you have Jana Wood, who is the Harford County Correctional Association president here tonight, the warden, Daniel Gabrath is here with me tonight. All of us, and so many members of the Correctional Association, so many of our correctional deputies are here in support of this. This is a way at a time where hiring and retention has not ever, in anyone's memory, been harder. This is a way to allow us to retain experienced correctional deputies at the detention center. Recently, we have seen a trend toward departing in law enforcement and in corrections. When people hit the minimum age, they're ready to hang it up and move on to something else, almost anything else. This would be an incentive for those people not only to stay from year 20 to 25, but from 25 to 30, because they'd be able to participate in the drop for a full 5 years. So I'm asking as the sheriff, again, appreciate the county executive for submitting this. looking out for what serves our community the best. And what serves our community the best is keeping our experienced correctional deputies for as long as we can. Once we've trained them and they're with us, we don't want to lose them in short order. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Well, thank you for your support letter and the fact that you point out the recruitment and retention portion of this, because we hear that with all of our services, EMS, fire and EMS, and everything else. So it's very important. Council, at this time, any questions? Mr. Wagner?
Just 2 points. Retention at the detention center is not as volatile as it is for your deputies that are on the road or in other places, is it?
We are finding it easier. I mean, we're finding it very challenging. I don't want to understate how challenging it is to find either presently law enforcement or correctional deputies. We are finding it much more challenging to find and retain correctional deputies. And we're carrying many more vacancies on the corrections side of the house.
Okay. And you mentioned a 3.5% interest rate. Is that a fixed rate, or does it fluctuate at all?
So the 3.5 is a minimum. So technically, if we were to ever raise the actuarial rate of return above 7%, then the rate would go up, but it would be fixed. And I wouldn't expect us to raise that rate of return. So for all intents and purposes, it's fixed.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Anyone else? Mr. Giangiordano?
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Does that affect you, or does it affect if you have any lateral transfers that come into, would that help for any lateral? Do they get credit for another office?
If they stayed the requisite number of years, which I believe would be, they'd have to do a whole 20 years here to be eligible.
Okay.
So they would be,
But if they were 10 years there and they came here for 10, would that combine and give them the 20 or no?
I believe I read that they can buy into the system.
Whether or not the service is credited under the plan doesn't change under the drop. So if they were otherwise eligible to get credit under the retirement plan, by choosing to go into the drop or not choosing to go into the drop has no effect on their level of benefits.
Now, I do believe that it needs to be transferred from a comparable plan. Like,
Right.
I could not.
Like if
become
somebody
a
was from
correctional
Baltimore
officer
County and they
today.
decided they wanted you had an opening for, lateral position over here, and they came over here, and the reason they wouldn't have come was you didn't have the drop, and now all of a sudden you have the drop, that would benefit us maybe bringing somebody from, different jurisdiction,
Yeah,
correct?
I think it would, and I think it will, and I believe they have to buy their time, is what I read in the pension. So if they had 5 years in another qualifying system and came up here in order to join the sheriff's office pension plan, they would have to pull their money out and then buy it up here.
Okay, but it's a tool you could use to
Yes, then they get
recruit.
those years of credited service towards the total. Still, then they'd have to do 25 and belong from 25 to 30, up to 5 years in the drop.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano. Anyone else? Ms. Dixon, do we have anyone signed up?
We do, Mr. President. We have one, Jana Wood.
Good evening, ma'am. Name and address for the record?
Jana Wood, it's 109 Woodland Greenway in Aberdeen, Maryland. Good evening, Councilman. My name is Jana Wood, and I'm the president of the Harford County Correctional Association. Our association represents the correctional deputies at the Harford County Sheriff's Office. As with many law enforcement and correctional agencies across the nation, we are experiencing difficulties in attracting qualified candidates to fill our deputy vacancies. We currently have about 40 vacancies that we are trying to fill. Corrections is an essential part of public safety, but one that does not always attract the same attention or interest as law enforcement. Our job is largely done outside of the public eye, often behind walls of steel and concrete. We keep our community safe by maintaining custody of offenders that society has deemed dangerous enough to incarcerate. In addition to recruiting new deputies, we are also focusing on retention of long-term employees. I heard a couple of questions in reference to retention. We have some statistics. In about 10 years, we've hired approximately 120 employees, and we've retained a little bit less than half of those employees. So some of them have left to transfer to law enforcement. Some of them have been terminated. Some of them have moved on to other careers, but we retain about less than half of those that we've hired in 10 years. So the Harford County Correctional Association, we are trying to secure DROP, the Deferred Retirement Option Program, for correctional deputies who continue to serve our community. We believe that this bill would help us not only to retain current employees who have considerable knowledge and skills, but who otherwise might be considering retirement at 25 years of service. And as you've heard, our counterparts in law enforcement do currently have this benefit. We thank you for your consideration of Bill 22-023, and we appreciate your continuing support of public safety in Harford County.
Thank you, ma'am.
There are no more speakers, Mr. President.
All right, with no other speakers, this will conclude the public hearing for Bill 22-023, and it will be taken up at a future meeting. Thank you, gentlemen. Bill 22-024, definition zoning daycare center. Councilman Jan Giordano.
Good evening, Council President. It's an act to repeal and reenact with amendments the definition of a daycare center in Section 267-4, definitions of Article 1 standards of Chapter 267 zoning. Harford County Code is amended to provide that a daycare center may include a kindergarten as supplementary use and general relating to zoning. So regarding the Bill 2204, purpose of the legislation, like I said, is to amend the 267-4 of the Hartford County Development Code. It's going to include daycare centers, supplementary to kindergarten classes, but it also has to be approved by the Maryland State Department of Education. So numerous requests have been asked by the planning and zoning for daycare facilities. So where somebody drops off their kid for daycare, that they can also provide them with kindergarten, also as approved by the Maryland State Department of Education. So it's going to give the citizens more options for their children in daycare, extend their education, same setting, same building, same environment, promote education for our other Harford County children. So I think it's important that, especially in today's teaching world, that the kids have an opportunity to continue on from daycare to kindergarten at the same place. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Councilman Jan Giordano. Council, your time for other questions. Mr. Wagner?
I just have a question for clarification. Does kindergarten classes presume pre-K as well? Or would pre-K have to be an amendment that's added to it to make sure that it is?
I don't know.
My daughter went to pre-K.
It's just something to look at if you would. We'll talk about it.
Is that it, Mr. Wagner?
That is, yeah.
All right,
thanks.
thank you. Anyone else? Council, Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Council President. So is this outside the realm of Harford County public schools?
It would be approved by the Maryland State Department, so it would be like a church organization that has daycare, and then they're going to provide kindergarten in that church, or it could be somewhere else.
So more or less like a charter school or something like that? I mean,
I don't know what the definition of a charter school is, but it does provide for kindergarten and daycare. So anybody who's commercial daycare center that wants to provide kindergarten would also have to go to, I guess, to the Maryland State Department of Education to get that approved.
all right. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else? Ms. Dixon, do we have anyone signed up?
There are no speakers, Mr. President.
All right, again, with no other speakers signed up, this will conclude the public hearing for Bill 22-024, and will be taken up, this bill will be taken up at a future meeting. With 15 minutes left before we start our general meeting, we'll take a recess. Good evening. Chair calls to order Legislative Session Day 22-025. I would ask you to please join us in standing for the pledge, followed by the opening prayer with Councilman Schroeds. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, we ask you to grant comfort, hope, and healing to all those in Florida who are impacted by Hurricane Ian. Please protect and guide the first responders during the ongoing relief efforts. We gather here this evening as colleagues and friends to provide continued service to the citizens of Harford County. We thank you for the opportunity to serve and improve the quality of life in our great county. Help us take some time from our busy lives to enjoy and appreciate our beautiful surroundings and change of season which is upon us. Amen.
Amen.
Agenda item number 4, presentation of proclamations. We have none. 5, consideration of petitions, applications, appointments, and nominations. Executive Appointments Advisory Board on Aging. May I have a motion? Anyone?
Mr. President,
Mr. Woods.
I move to approve the executive appointment of the Advisory Board on Aging.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. It's been moved and seconded to approve the reappointments of Ann DeGardo, Tammy Fitzgerald, Claudia Scunion, and Jacqueline Panowitz to the Advisory Board on Aging. Any discussion? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeder?
Aye.
Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
There being 7 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, the appointments are hereby approved. Agenda item number 6, special presentations. We have none. 7, approval of minutes. Public hearing October 4th, 2022. Legislative Day 22-024, October 4th, 2022. Are there any corrections to the minutes? There being no corrections, the minutes stand approved. Agenda item number 8, introduction and consideration of resolutions. Resolution 020-22, Master Water and Sewer Plan Fall 2022 Update. May I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano. It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution 02022. Is there any discussion? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeder?
Aye.
Mr. Wagner? Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
Being 7 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, Resolution 020-22 is hereby approved. Resolution 021-22, Detention Center Inmate Weekend Fees. May I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. May I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano. It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 021-22. Is there any discussion?
Council President.
Mr. Johnson?
We all got letters from the NAACP of Harford County, the Harford County branch, and they brought up a number of things that I also saw that could potentially be a problem. You know, just the lack of transparency, the potential to have inequality in the administration of the fees and things of that nature. I think that we should definitely, you know, really assess this, take a look at it, and table this until we can really get a good feel on what this could potentially be for our citizens of this county.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. Anyone else? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeder?
Aye.
Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
There being 6 votes in the affirmative, 1 negative, Resolution 021-22 is hereby approved. Agenda item number 9, introduction of bills. We have none. 10, introduction and consideration of amendments. We have none. 11, call for final reading of bills. Bill 22-019, Restaurants COVID Moratorium Extension. May I have a motion? Anyone?
Mr. President,
Mr. Woods?
move to approve Bill number 22-019, Restaurant COVID Moratorium Extension.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano. It's been moved and seconded to approve Bill 22-019. Is there any discussion? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
There being 7 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, Bill 22-019 is hereby approved. Bill 22-020, Volunteer Firefighter Length of Service Award Program. Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve Bill number 22-020, Volunteer Firefighter Length of Service Award Program.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano.
Mr. Coffey.
I know. It's been moved and seconded to approve Bill 22-020. Is there any discussion?
Without looking, who are the sponsors on that bill?
I
we all
believe the sponsors are all of us with the exception of Mr. Woods.
Okay, all right,
That's my understanding.
Yep.
okay.
That is what is here for prepared tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeds? Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
There being 7 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, Bill 22-020 is hereby approved. Bill 22-021, Tax Credit for Properties Near Refuse Disposal System, as amended. Mr. Schroeds.
Council President, I make a motion to approve Bill number 22-021, tax credit for properties near refuge disposal system.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano. It's been moved and seconded to approve Bill 22-021. Is there any discussion? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
Being 7 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, Bill 22-021, as amended, is hereby approved. Agenda number 12, enrollment of bills, Bill 22-019, Bill 22-020, Bill 22-021 are certified as being the text finally passed. Agenda item number 13, unfinished business. There is none. 14, new business. We have none. And I'd like to, well, I'll go ahead and go. 15, business from the president. I want to advertise the next adequate Public Facilities Advisory Board meeting, which is not till December the 8th, but due to our schedule, we wanted to start the advertising now. It'll be 6 p.m., second floor, council office conference room. And then this past week, we've had several things going on. My colleagues and I have been several different places, Sark's ribbon cutting, Upper Chesapeake tour in Aberdeen, the 90th anniversary at Oak Grove Baptist, and Hartford Business Roundtable for Education this morning. And all of my council members will speak in much more detail than I did. So with that, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. I just have one thing tonight. I want to congratulate Pastor Harper of Channel of Grace Church in Edgewood for his elevation to bishop. We went down to the church and presented him and the church with a proclamation for their 12-year anniversary, as well as his elevation to bishop. So I just wanted to make that public and give him the just due that he deserves. So with that being said, I'll yield my time back.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. Councilman Woods?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to congratulate all the fire companies that are doing their open houses this month and have already started. The ones we've been to have been outstanding, so keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. Councilman Giangiordano?
Thank you, Council President. I guess a little bit more detail. I want to congratulate Louisa and her staff at SARC for the ribbon cutting. So I was able to along with a couple other council people, be there, present a proclamation. And I also like to congratulate George Dunhauser of Delhaven Service Station. He is the Racing Fuel Super Gas champion. George has been Delhaven for years. Before that, he owned Getty Gas Station. He's in Bel Air, so congratulations to George. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman Jane Giordano. Councilman Schroes.
Thank you, Council President. Also, congratulations to SARC on their new safe house. I know a lot of people made that happen, and just want to wish them the best. Also attended the Hartford Soil Conservation District's annual banquet, and congratulations to the Cooperator of the Year. That went to Timothy and Tracy Gay of Molly Hill Farm. Want to thank all those that supported and came out to the Mason-Dixon Community Services Oktoberfest. Of course, they do a great service to Northern Hartford County, providing food and fuel to those in need. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schroes. Councilman Wagner.
As the council president mentioned, there was a tour of the Aberdeen campus of the University of Maryland Upper Chesapeake Health Center that's under construction. Some is nearing completion, but that Phil Crocker and Colin Wood gave us a great tour, and the place is absolutely beautiful inside. That what is finished, and it's absolutely impressive. It's going to be a great asset to the Aberdeen area and certainly to Hartford County when it is finished up, which is going to be a little over a year from now, I believe they said, before they would be moving in. On Sunday, some of us attended the Oak Grove Baptist Church 90 years anniversary. That was well attended, and it was good to see everyone that I hadn't seen in many years that came back for it. Many years ago, an anniversary like that, you called a homecoming, and that was exactly what it was that day. After that, I left and went to Reisterstown for a viewing for one of our own here in the county. Mary Kate Herbick's mom had passed. Rick Herbick worked for the county for many years, and Mary Kate worked in the council side for quite a few years before going across the street. So we certainly, pass along condolences to the family on the passing of Genevieve Madanowski. And then October 10th, the husband of Councilwoman Carolyn Zinner passed, and certainly we extend condolences and sympathy to that family. And then last night I attended the Aberdeen City Council meeting where they presented the plans for what is going to be the proposed Aberdeen Activity Center, trying to get a handle on what they want to do in that building and then programs they want to run out of it. So at least that's on a track forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Wagner. Councilman Beulah.
Thank you, Council President. Just a couple. Jean and I would also like to extend our sincere condolences to the Zinner family, and we will keep them in our prayers for strength and just comfort in this difficult time. Also, I would like to just congratulate Oak Grove Baptist on 90 years of service to the community. They provide so many ministries. It is Jean and I, it's our home church, which we've attended there for over 25 years, and it's been a blessing for us to be able to worship there. And, we just love the church, and we just pray for another 90 years of service and saving souls in the community of Hartford County, and they have a worldwide mission. So congratulations to them and Pastor Testerman, and it was just a great service, I think. It was a homecoming, like you said, Rob. That's all I have, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Beulah. Agenda item number 17, comments and input from attending citizens. Ms. Dixon, do we have anyone signed up?
We do, Mr. President. We have 4 this evening.
Very well.
Chuck Mezan, followed by Ken Shannon.
Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Name is Chuck Mezan, 1812 Park Beach Drive, Perryman, Maryland. I'm here this evening to request the council review the Hartford County Code regarding community input meetings, also known as SIM, and specifically what constitutes the need for an additional SIM. In section 268.20, the code identifies that a SIM is required by the developer of a large project to provide information to the community regarding the proposed development, and to allow citizens to ask questions and make comments. In item J of this section, it states, if the plan submitted is substantially different from the plan presented at the community meeting, another community meeting and notification as specified under the section shall be required. So earlier this month, the Permian Peninsula received their October surprise as the September 27th plans came from Frederick Ward. And in these plans they are substantially different from the original SIM meeting. First, the proposed use has changed from a warehouse to a non-sort, high-cube fulfillment center. These differ from traditional warehousing because of their height and automation. Because of this increase in height and automation, they tend to generate more truck traffic with fewer employees. Second, substantially different change is now the maximum height of these freight terminals has increased from 40 feet to 65 feet. This is a 63% increase in height for this project. In cubic feet, the project went from 208 million cubic feet to now 338 million cubic feet, an additional 130 million cubic feet of storage space. Third, the employees at the largest shift change decreased from 2,389 employees to 953 employees. This is a 60% decrease in estimated employee traffic, which translates to a much lower number of jobs this project is forecasted to produce. Although there is a 60% decrease in employee traffic, the total amount of parking spaces only decreased by 18%. These estimates are wrapped around the statement, the number of employees at the largest shift is unknown at this time. Of course they are. These are speculative freight terminals, which have been denied by the Transportation Department twice already. So let's increase the total storage space 63%, reduce the estimated traffic numbers by 60, but let's keep the parking spaces just in case. Since the original SIM on December 1st, 2021, significant changes have been made which should warrant another SIM. If changes, such as proposed use of the property, a 63% larger building space, a 60% reduction in estimated employee traffic, and new proposed roads are not enough to qualify as substantially different, then I would please ask the council to consider a zoning amendment to revise this vague language around this definition. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Call your next speaker.
Ken Shannon, followed by Glenn Dutter.
Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
I'm Ken Shannon, and I live at 2044 Park Beach Drive in Perryman. I'm wearing a 3P Coalition hat, but I'm speaking for myself in regards to unwanted and inappropriate industrial development in Perryman, specifically the proposed Mitchell property development and the traffic, noise, and pollution that will come with it. Mr. President, may I address the representative from my district, F?
You can speak to all of us.
Mr. Beulah, it has recently come to light that changes made by the Chesapeake Real Estate Group to their proposed plan to build freight terminals on the Mitchell Farm in Perryman will bring less than a third of the jobs that were shown on the plans that were under review at the time of the DAC in January. Also, as Mr. Mazan just mentioned, the height of the buildings with a square footage of 5.2 million square feet is being increased by more than 60%. Given this new information, do you oppose the plan to build these freight terminals in the middle of a residential area in Perryman in your district?
Mr.
I'll
Shea?
answer that at a later date.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I also sent you an email on that topic as well, and haven't seen a response. So I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about that. I wonder when the council found out about this change to the proposed Mitchell property development. There was an email from Whit McQuaig, a vice president at Chesapeake Real Estate Group, to the highest levels of Hartford Planning and Zoning on August 10th, saying that they were changing the development to a high-cube fulfillment center, non-sort. That's the kind of information that the council should be bringing to concerned citizens instead of the other way around. The council knows that hundreds of your constituents have an intense interest in what is going on at the Mitchell property development. Instead of citizens playing Columbo and spending dozens of hours trying to access and understand project documents, the District F representative and the council president should be pushing information to the citizens who attended the SIM and the DAC and anyone else that asked for it, especially when it involves a major change to the nature and size of the project. While the council takes no action to inform or support Perryman citizens and remains silent when they should be speaking out against a terrible industrial development in a residential neighborhood in Perryman, there is someone who will advocate for bold ideas such as a new state park along the Bush River. Winnie Roach is running for council president in November and has publicly stated that the Mitchell property development's proposed use does not fall within the current zoning for warehouses. She has also stated that the project threatens clean water and fragile green space on the peninsula, which we must stand up to protect. Jacob Bennett is running District F as District F representative, has stated the people of Perryman have been dumped upon with industrial freight terminals for over 20 years. This has created significant traffic issues, increased air pollution, and strained local infrastructure. He has called out the county for being slow to repair Perryman's roads, take care of their parks, and to maintain the public housing in the community, but quick to collect campaign donations and tax revenue from developers. I stand with Winnie Roach and Jacob Bennett and hope that they are sitting in those seats come next year.
Mr. President, this is, I mean, it was crossing the line into campaigning, which is not permitted in the council chambers.
It's okay, Mr. Kearney. Don't say another word because your time is up. Call your next speaker.
Glenn Dutter, followed by Kate McDonald.
Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. Glenn Dutter, 1806 Park Beach Drive, Aberdeen, 21001. I showed you a sample like this that I took in late June from an intermittent creek in Ha Ha Branch. You can see it's as clear as tap water, and the nitrogen level here was so low I had trouble measuring it. Less than 3 parts per million. That's about as good as it gets. Last week, I sampled the same creek, same point, and this is what I got. And you can see that it's heavily silted. And what I did was try and filter out all that sediment so that I could get a nitrogen level. It took a while, but I don't need too much. And I got a nitrogen level of 7 to 8 parts per million. An increase of 2, maybe 3 parts per million. That's a lot. And so all I want you to see is what's happening with just minimum construction at what we call Abington Woods. And it's more forested wetland than it is woods, according to the delineation. One other thing, I have another bottle. You can see it's empty. And I'm going to use this, but I'm going to use this if the Perryman Industrial Complex is ever completed, because I'll make another prediction. We've been predicting this for a long time. Those parking lots, those big parking lots, are going to bleed off diesel fuel, crankcase oil, and hydraulic fluids at a greater rate than can be treated. And I'll use this bottle to take samples of that hydrocarbon-laden water as it moves towards the Bush River, just so that you'll know what's coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good evening, ma'am. Name and address for the record.
Good evening. Kate McDonald, 2100 Park Beach Drive. Thank you, Glenn, for that. That's pretty dirty water, don't you agree? So in the interest of updating things, I wanted to update a little talk I gave a few weeks ago. According to your own website, the 4 objectives of enterprise zones are to, 1, encourage the creation of well-paying new jobs for Harford County residents. 2, ensure the retention and spur expansion of resident businesses. 3, promote development and occupancy of vacant and underutilized buildings. Support the county's commitment to revitalizing older industrial areas of Harford County. So I mentioned in that speech that the jobs these these freight distribution centers create pay about $17 an hour, or $35,360 a year gross, which is 62% lower than the average income in Harford County. Now, with the updated plans, as Chuck mentioned, the number of employees has decreased by 60%. I thought this was about job creation, guys. It's not. Ensure the retention and spur expansion of resident businesses. And 3, promote development and occupancy of vacant and underutilized buildings. These guys have found a way to go bigger and more egregious, and it's just slipping through under your noses. So the reason they're doing this, they're making them bigger and higher to be more automated, so they have to employ fewer people and have more trucks. There's no economic development for our area. There wasn't before they changed their plan. Now there's even less. Support the community's commitment to revitalizing older industrial areas of Harford County. Curtis, I'm sorry. Nothing. There's been no revitalization of your district, at least the Route 40. I'm sorry, as a Republican woman, I can no longer support you. You've done nothing but destroy lives in your district. You need to not run for office again. We have no intention as a group of sitting by and allowing you to continue to destroy our lives. We're just not going to stop and let you do that. We deserve new leadership and equal treatment under the Harford County zoning laws. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
There are no more speakers, Mr. President.
With no other speakers, this will conclude this minute. Mr. Shannon, can I see you for just a minute, please?